Well, here we are. We're live. Joe Chaffee, Joe Rayo on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Monday, the 6th of July, 2020. And my God, the thunderstorms across New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, beyond wicked this afternoon, and they're still not done.
It's almost like there was an explosion, like some kind of a nuclear explosion, because it didn't like sweep one way or come down. It just started in one spot and kind of expanded like an explosion.
And,
It
and,
came
then,
from
and
all
then at one
directions.
point, the thunderstorms actually looked like they formed a circular ring. It was just
Right.
really, just the whole afternoon, the way these things evolved was just utterly strange. I saw a post from Jeff Biradelli, who is on CBS and uh, was worked here in New York, was down in Miami for a while. Now he's back in New York doing some network stuff with climate and other things. And he pointed out that in a post that I saw that the I forgot the measurement that he used that he referenced, but it produced numbers that thunderstorms only in Oklahoma produce, and those cells were sitting, they were moving over the counties surrounding New York City and moving right over Manhattan. Eventually, that cell did wind up weakening, but it was incredibly impressive when it made its approach.
Yes, and the term supercell, maybe, is that, did you mention that,
He
how?
didn't use the phrase supercell, but he did reference the fact that by the measurements that he quoted, that it was and it was one of those technical things that you and I have probably never heard of, but it was uh, he mentioned that those are the kind of storms that you see in Oklahoma a lot. So when I saw that, when I read that, I was like, boy, that is impressive, and the rain that is going on in and around the Philadelphia area that started when the thunderstorms actually were born there today. There's the radar is still. I'm shocked at how loaded it is in areas where they already got hit pretty hard. There's still more to go.
It's amazing how Philadelphia, Camden, Central Jersey, South Jersey, going back to what, about a month or 6 weeks ago, when they had that it was eventually called the derecho. I mean,
Yes.
they have gotten the worst of it in terms of convection and severe weather all through the last few weeks. It's been unbelievable. It's almost like somebody painted a target on some of those cities and towns, and every time we get into a pattern for potential thunderstorm activity, the first place you look is down in the Philadelphia area.
Right. And once again, SPC almost nailed it to the T with the way they drew the severe thunderstorm watch up this afternoon, where it stopped right at about New York City and
Right.
then covered all of the counties in New Jersey from north to south. But that was where the northern extent of it, and sure enough, that's how it lined up. And kudos to them for a very good, very accurate, another very accurate severe weather forecast. And folks sometimes are very quick to jump on weather people when things aren't 100%. Well, you know what? Sometimes they've been hitting on they have been hitting the bullseye lately quite a bit in at least for the areas that we cover because we're on top of it and we've noticed these things. So big kudos to SPC. Also, big kudos for SPC for not putting up the severe thunderstorm watch up right after I wrote down that they might put up a severe thunderstorm watch. Okay, they actually gave me a little lag time today. I was able to catch my breath, so it wasn't like literally seconds later. I'm going to I brought up the mesoscale, and you folks at home can go to SPC's website and pull the mesoscale analysis up for virtually every sector of the United States. And one of the interesting things about this today is the fact that uh, when you look at this at first, sometimes it's obvious what's going on in the upper air, and sometimes you look at the upper air and you say, well, how could something so genteel looking or perhaps non-threatening looking trigger off some thunderstorms? Well, if you look at this at first glance, you think, well, there's not really too much going on, but in reality, there are a couple of weak short waves, what look like weak short waves, and actually the enhancement really came, Joe, from the really effective daytime heating that occurred today. I mean, we were bright and sunny almost from the get go, and the dew points were sitting up around 70 all morning long into the afternoon. The atmosphere was extremely unstable, so just all it took really was just a little bit of a kink. And there's actually a couple of them. There's one back in Western PA. He's not doing very much, but there's one right overhead that is going through just a little kink there in the upper atmosphere. And I've got this is the 700 millibar, and you put all that together. You had Cape values that were running up into the several thousands, and then you don't see that up around here that often.
Right, like 3,000 I saw on one of the discussions, and yeah, you're absolutely right. I stepped outside around noontime here, almost perfectly clear, a few wispy high clouds. I said, "My goodness, if there's going to be any kind of development in the coming hours, they sure could feed off of the both the sunlight, the heat, the dew point temperatures well up in the 60s to near 70. I mean, we had it all, and all we needed, as you pointed out, Joe, was just even just a rather small little disturbance interacting with all of that, and that set the stage for what we've seen so far down, mainly across New Jersey, but also across portions of the New York area. And I even think Long Island, Nassau County saw some activity today, but really, really is just amazing.
Once again, there's a thunderstorm in Long Island Sound that's going by just to my north. There's a special marine warning out. It's not touching any shoreline on either side, apparently. Uh, right now, it is 7:07 Eastern Time. So if you're watching this live or if you're listening uh, on a podcast later on, if you're watching this on a replay, you're looking at dated stuff here. So what you're seeing here is at 7:07 Eastern Time. By the way, big welcome to everybody watching from the app, everybody watching from Facebook. Welcome tonight to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Right now, we have flash flood warnings still going on in and around Philadelphia and Trenton and some of the neighboring counties back southwest of Allentown. Near Reading, inside a flash flood warning. We still have severe thunderstorm watches up for all of New Jersey except the northeastern counties. And we also have a number of severe thunderstorm warnings that are working at the moment in parts of southeastern Pennsylvania, northern Delaware, over Chesapeake Bay back to Washington and Baltimore, along the immediate Jersey Shore and south of Atlantic City down to Cape May and covering the coastal waters. There's a renegade flash flood warning up in Morristown. Again, all of this due to the thunderstorms that either move through or are about to move through. Because when you look at the radar, this is the radar out of Fort Dix, Joe. There is a really there's some really hefty looking cells in southern New Jersey that are moving southward into northern Delaware. The Philadelphia and Trenton just got a little bit of a break, but they're getting some more rain coming in because there are some powerful cells back around Lancaster, Harrisburg, up and points northward up along I-81. There's also a cluster of storms in extreme northeast PA and over Monticello, and those are kind of wobbling to the east. I don't know if those cells are going to survive. And then, of course, whatever was over New York City and western Long Island, those are all now have weakened. But still, quite a bit going on the radar tonight. And I'm going to shift down. Let's go to the Dover radar so we can see what's going on in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. It looks like they're getting absolutely pounded here. These cells are hitting peak intensity at the moment and only moving very, very slowly to the southeast. This is, Joe, is like, this is in the springtime, you get these storms with weather fronts and they move along at a fairly rapid clip. They're in and out and done. But now when we get into the heart of the summer where the flow in the upper atmosphere really starts to slow down, these storms sometimes under the right conditions like we had today will form, and then you wind up, they sit there and they just pound these areas for hours and hours.
Yeah, it looks like on this view here from the Dover radar, it looks like there's a bit of training. So
Yeah.
this may last for a while.
I'm going to go up back. Let me go back to Mount Holly and bring up the Doppler. Let's see what we can get in terms of rainfall here. Sometimes you got to be careful when you use the Doppler because they don't always, you have to see what the starting time is. So this is as of 7 o'clock Eastern time. So they've got some in the yellows in and around just south and west of Philadelphia, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 inches of rain. There's also a patch of 2 to 3 inch rains, looks like over Bergen County in northeast New Jersey, and then a couple of others maybe back through western Essex and over toward Morristown. So that kind of explains the flash flooding, the flash flood warnings that you have there. So we'll just have to wait till later to see. But some areas that have been getting hit very hard with the nature of thunderstorms, it's not, you don't usually see widespread areas of 3, 4, 5 inches. Rather, they're concentrated, and indeed, when you look at this Doppler shot, that pretty much reflects that.
Yep, yep. And again, I don't know what it is, but it's been like a magnet. The central part of New Jersey. I'd be interested to see the rainfall totals over the last, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks. Long Island, Hudson Valley, New Jersey, and I'm sure we'd probably see a bullseye from Philadelphia to Tom's River, or from Philadelphia down to Atlantic City, somewhere along those among those cities. The axis of some exceedingly heavy rain amounts is probably in place. You talk about of late, it seemed like it was rather dry or whatever, but we certainly are making up for it, because Joe, it looks like we'll be in line for more thunderstorm activity tomorrow. And looking at the overall pattern, the only day this week that we might be able to get through the entire day without seeing any threat of showers and thunderstorms might be Thursday. Other than that, I see tomorrow, I see Wednesday, I see Friday into the start of the upcoming weekend.
Friday might be because of a low that is in the southeast right now, just inland of the
right.
coast. That's going to straddle the coast and move northward. I just opened up the regional radar site so you can see. It targeted this area today because it's very quiet up in New England. Just some scattered cells now popping up in parts of Connecticut, and then once you go south of Washington D.C. into Virginia. Johnny Quest got pounded last night with about half a foot of rain, and there's a little bit of rain going on there, but the storms aren't sitting there at the moment. But there's not too much going on through the rest of Virginia and North Carolina. So we were the target zone. We were right on the edge of where that, the southern extent of where that shortwave was coming down. Everything just lined up perfectly. And, SPC went from a marginal risk this morning, and then they upgraded it to a slight risk. They were, in a sense, they were playing catch up with the forecast as the day wears on. But sometimes sometimes that's what you do. I mean, sometimes you have to, and you're in a situation where you're not quite sure how it's all going to play, and then suddenly you see all this, all these pieces come together with all this daytime heating, and your forecast is going to be very, very fluid. So I think some folks sometimes seem to think that you should be able to pick these things out months in advance, and sometimes sometimes it comes down to minutes in advance.
Right. And jumping, and I don't know if you want to do it right now or in the next few minutes or whatever, but we were discussing yesterday about how active the tropics are.
Yes, so we can go to that. I just got to find where I put the map. Okay, here we go. So we did set a record, by the way. Edouard is now extratropical at way out in the Atlantic. In case you're plotting it, at 5 p.m., 42.7 and 46 west, and it is the earliest we have ever gotten to the E storm since the satellite era began in 1968. And the old record was Emily in 2005, which came about on July 12th. But it should be noted that Emily eventually did become one of the earliest Category 4 hurricane, almost a 5. It was the earliest Category 4 hurricane ever observed in the Atlantic. So, and that, of course, was in that banner year of 2005 that still holds the record for most storms in the Atlantic basin.
And the next storm on the list, I believe the F storm is Faye.
Faye.
And we have two systems. They only have 10% probability.
Well, the one in the east, Joe, the Hurricane Center actually on their 5-day outlook has that at 40%, and that's going to hinge on whether does the surface low emerge off the South and North Carolina coast, or does it straddle just inland of the coast and move up? Because I think it's going to move up. It's a matter of whether it's just onshore, or is it going to be offshore by a handful of miles? Because in this instance, it might make a big difference.
It could make a big difference if it gets its feet wet. That's absolutely true. The water temperatures are rather mild, or rather warm. I think I saw a note that Ambrose was already up to like 76, 77 degrees. That's pretty warm for the beginnings of the. Well, actually, I don't know if it's we can't say it's the beginnings anymore. Maybe toward the midpoint or early to midpoint of the summer season. But the waters are really heating up.
They are above average, north of 35 degrees north. What was Ambrose? Ambrose, for those you know, is just outside of New York Harbor. What was their water temperature?
I think I saw 76.
Really? For early July?
Is that some kind of a
That's
record?
crazy. That's
Yeah,
very warm.
that's like bathtub weather.
Yeah, that's
That's the kind of weather
usually.
you would see. That's the kind of thing you would see in the Gulf of Mexico, I would
I
say.
mean, we get to the mid 70s here, usually mid and late August or the first week of September. But to see it this early in July, that is astounding. And when you look at this system on the satellite right now, by the way, in the southeast, it already has that look to it. Sometimes you can look at the satellite and you look at the clouds and the structure of the clouds. You got that little twist going on. It has that look to it. It's just over land. Some of it is obviously off some of the thunderstorms, and a little bit of this system extends out off the southeast coast and off the Florida coast. So there is a slight ocean influence, but the actual low center that's being analyzed is right on land. But the cloud structure, it looks like something that if it does get out, if that surface low does get out over the coastal waters, it may have a shot of developing into something. So I think we do want to pay close attention to this. And by the
Now,
way, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I
Go ahead.
now I need to the correction because I did see some buoy reports. Ambrose Light apparently has no recent reports. However, they are reporting, and the only other one I recognize here is Kings Point. Kings Point is 73.2.
That's
There's
still warm for up here.
one of them, BGNN4, at 1830 Eastern Daylight Time, 74.1. Yeah, just about all of them are somewhere between 72.1 and 74.1, which is really like again way above
Yeah,
the
there's that
time.
buoy that's about there's that buoy. I think that's like 15 miles or 20 miles south of Fire Island. Do you have that number up there? Because I don't, I didn't have a chance to pull that up.
That's BGNN4. I'm looking on a map now. Well, BGNN4, that's believe it or not, that looks like it's in Kilvan Cove. That looks like it's in Staten, just outside of the coast of Staten Island, between Staten Island and New Jersey. Um, there's one that's south of. Well, there's one that looks like it's at Sandy Hook, SDN8N4.
Right,
That
but
is
there,
72,
s-
70,
s-
70, 77, 77
really,
degrees.
that's
77.
insane. That is insane. And meanwhile, by the way,
And
on this visible, you can see the thunderstorms, just how dramatic how they blow up overhead tonight. I mean, they just exploded here late during this afternoon,
oh, and wait a
and they're
minute,
still
Joe.
going.
BGNN4, the one that's in Staten Island.
Right.
I was looking at the wrong column. That's air temperature. The water temperature at that particular thing. That's again. It looks like it's just off the coast of Staten Island. 76.3.
You're getting me to
This is
think that
crazy.
you're getting me to think that somebody weed in the water they're too close to that thermometer. but but yeah, no, these numbers they're big. That's why I was kind of curious about the one off of Fire Island, because that's about 20 miles out, and that usually is that's closer to. Sometimes you get these warm eddies that get very close to there, so you could wind up with a a bigger number. But again, let's keep an eye going forward, folks. We're going to watch. This is the area that the Hurricane Center is talking about. If the low center moves off the coast, it does have a shot at developing, because conditions are going to be conducive. If the low center winds up staying inland, you could wind up with you'll wind up with a low that comes up with a rather nice concentration of rain with it, and that might be something to look forward to at the end of the week if it holds together. So something to watch for this early in the season at the very least. The wide view of the radar tonight, you can see our storms here still playing as we showed you on the local view. Now in the southeast, the band there's the showers and storms. There's a banding nature to all of this, and that's another thing that you look at this. There's just some kind of low here at at low levels and at mid levels as well. That's moving very, very slowly to the east. So you see these when it's banded like this, that's also another clue. And you got some scattered activity going on in the Ohio Valley. There's some stormy weather up in the northern Great Lakes through Wisconsin and northeast Minnesota. Another busy night in the northern plains. The Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk of severe weather there. We have some working severe thunderstorm watches at the moment in parts of the northern plains. And as far as rainfall is concerned, still pretty bullish here. This does not include anything that's fallen today, but the WPC folks from tonight's 8 p.m. tonight to 8 p.m. next Monday night showing some decent rains up and down the eastern seaboard, and particularly in the coastal Carolinas, reflecting whatever that low is going to do. But if this winds up verifying, Joe, it really should put an end to most of the area's dry conditions, including New England, which has actually done fairly well in the last week or so, picking up some much-needed rainfall.
And two people on the chat board making two interesting notations. William Huber pointing out that he just looked up Mauritius Inlet, and the temperature is 75. The water temperature is 75.
Mauritius Inlet in Mauritius Inlet at mid to late August, because the water is so shallow. If you're far enough away from where the tide influence is, that water gets up into the mid 80s.
Wow.
It's bath water. I fished in there, and I felt like I was in Florida.
And Scott Briller pointed out, first time hitting 100. That's for the number of people who are watching us right now. First time hitting 100 in many days. Congratulations, everybody. It went down to 99, then bounced back up to 101.
Well, it's good. We got some viewers tonight. That's a good thing. This the late spring, early summer,
to 104.
Holiday weekend. There's this pause. We got we orchestrated the severe weather only so that we could get our audience size enough to break it over 100. Clearly, clearly we were responsible for all this. We could create our own little conspiracies here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Okay, so let's
just wait until the first. The first hurricane shows even the slightest threat to the eastern seaboard, and we'll be breaking all records.
Well, look, let's hope I get because I'm doing this off the hotspot, and my data is going to run out in the next couple of days. So let's hope that I get the internet back so we can have we can continue our regular broadcast. But I'm finding out I didn't realize today. Places get stuff fixed. It's hard to find anybody to do it, even with the cable operators. There's the low, by the way. There's a surface low being analyzed, a weak 10-12 low in southeast Georgia, where you're seeing rain and temperatures. Actually, in the Carolinas, much of the Carolinas today, and in northern Georgia, temperatures didn't get out of the 70s. You go up into North Carolina, where there was a bit more, there was more in the way of sun, and then you start to see the 90-degree readings. But clouds and rain from that system. Keeping temperatures down. And by the way, Joe, at 21Z at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because of all the clouds in Florida, where there's some sun, there are a few odd spots where temperatures are in the mid 80s to around 90, but there's a lot of places where temperatures are only in the 70s. So the clouds in the southeast and into Florida holding temperatures down in the southern states. And once again, it's a little bit of an upside down nature to things because we're so much warmer here. We don't really have too much in the way of any. You can. There's no surface front or trough that's even being analyzed here on the 21Z map. So it's all that short wave and the daytime heating. That's really that's all it takes. Now I've got the GFS, and we're gonna run through this. Tonight, again, because I'm trying to sort of save my data so that we can keep these live streams as long as possible, we're going to run through the show and probably not go all the way to 8 o'clock like we often do. But these storms disappear, and as Mr. Rayo pointed out, probably a chance of some showers and storms tomorrow popping up. I don't think I don't think we're going to see anything widespread like we did today, but you never
No, I
know.
agree with that. I mean, the reason why we saw what we saw, or our places in New Jersey, again, because of the fact that we started off the day with a lot of sunshine, it stayed that way for a good part of the day into the afternoon. But tomorrow, Joe, I'm thinking that we're going to be looking at a lot of cloud cover, and the clouds probably,
We'll hold
as
temps
they
down.
saw down in Florida today, probably will keep the temperatures down and also hold down the threat of any really significant convection. I mean, there'll be some thunderstorms obviously around and pop-up showers, but nothing like the robust nature that we've seen this afternoon with some of these storms.
I'm going to switch over to the preset map instead of the radar map on the GFS. So when you see the green on here, it doesn't mean it's raining in all those spots at the same time. This is not a radar view. This is actual measurable precip view. But I'm doing this so that you can see the isobars a bit better as we follow this coastal low, but which by Wednesday afternoon is sitting just right along the South Carolina coast here, or just offshore. And again, this will be key as to whether something can develop out of this. You see a little bit of a wrapped up surface low south of Wilmington by Thursday morning, and then it just kind of disappears. But there is a closed isobar early Friday morning. There looks like there's some kind of low. You could probably put it near Norfolk, Virginia, moving northward. And in this instance of the GFS, the European is not that different. It runs the low literally just inland of the coast. So this is where we've had runs that had this a little bit further offshore. So this is what we're going to watch for. If it's inland, we'll get a decent shot of rain out of this here, Joe, on later Friday into Friday night if the GFS is right. I think even if the European is right. And then it moves up into New England, and that hopefully means improving weather conditions for the weekend. The way it looks, at least that's the plan at the moment.
What the long range model is also showing on the upper air, though, Joe, is that
Which
there
I'm
may be
pulling up right now.
some kind of an upper system, some kind of a trough that may be lingering or languishing behind the passage of that tropical system during the rest of the weekend into the start of next week. So I'm not sure how much we're going to, clear out uh, in due time. But the one thing I'd like to see is a nice little flow of air after so many days. I've lost count now how many days we've had dew points at least in the 60s. After so many days of this, it would be nice to see a couple of days of dew points in the 50s. We had a lot of those in May and much of June, but uh, all of a sudden now it's just turned tropical.
Yeah, I know. It would be nice to get a bit of a break like that. Here's the jet. I drew the jet stream up. This is early Wednesday morning, and of course, the more active northern part of the jet stream is north of New York City. It's up in northern New England and in Canada. And then if you look down down in the southeast, there's a little lingering west to east, light west to east winds. There's a just little shortwave trough that's responsible for that system in the southeast. And there's another trough that comes on this picture. I think it's probably better if I go to the U.S. view. You'll see it a bit better here. So there's two things that can happen in a situation like this. You have this upper low in Canada, north of Montana, and a trough that extends down into Montana and Wyoming. And of course, here's your weakness in the southeast, where you're going to have some kind of a low. Now, uh, with the flow, the main jet stream so far to the north, one of two things will happen. Either this system, the one in the plains, becomes like almost like a lever, where it just sort of pulls this southern system northward, or it would kick it out straight to the east. In this instance, it appears that it wants to pull it northward as that trough swings east. So that's the mechanism to bring it up the coast. And of course, as Joe pointed out, you've got this trough that sort of drops into the east Friday night and Saturday and kind of lingers there all weekend into early next week. There's still some evidence of it even into next Monday. And then
Right.
before it finally starts to lift out. And then you have to ask yourself the question for later next week. You've got this upper high in New Mexico and this arm now that goes all the way back into the Northeast. Is this going to be an opening for some heat, a return to heat and humidity that lasts for several days or more? That remains to be seen. But that's where it appears the models are going with this. And then of course after that, this big upper high builds in the southeastern part of the United States. So the GFS would imply that later next week and going into the weekend of say of July 18th and 19th, that we could be in the middle of a 3 or 4 day stretch of very hot weather.
Right. I've been hearing, forecasters that were talking about a heat wave this week or later this week, but from what I've been looking at, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And the one thing that did not factor in, I guess, to that forecast of heat is the fact that we have that, again, that tropical system or semi-tropical system to our south, which may make it, northward along the coast, bringing clouds and rain with it. And you think about it, Joe. Last
Excuse me.
last week was the week that we were supposed to have blistering heat based upon the GFS, progs of 10 and 15 days previous.
Right.
They're showing that big upper ridge and the building high and everything
It
else.
seems that
And then
these
and then all of a sudden we had a closed low
right.
develop.
Well,
And
it seems like the models early on want to let go of the idea of troughing in the east, and it keeps coming back. I just brought the European up just to show the same idea for the end of next week. The end of this week, with that system out near Lake Winnipeg, and of course the upper low that's off the southeast coast of the United States, again acting like almost a lever and just kind of lifting it up to the northeast. But here too, the European drops this trough into the eastern part of the United States, and it actually cuts it off in West Virginia and North Carolina and drops it down into Alabama and Georgia. Now you want to be careful with this because we've seen the models in the last couple of weeks do some really strange things with these upper lows, and some of them came to pass and some of them did not. This would argue maybe a slightly different scenario with regards to what the GFS has, because you wind up with a ridge off the East Coast. You have an upper high out to the west in Texas, but there's low pressure sort of in the middle here. So it's not a true heat wave type setup. It's a very warm and humid setup, but it wouldn't be anything excessive. Whereas the GFS evolves into something more excessive as we go later into the forecast period. So that'll be something for us to pay attention to in the longer term. So I'm going to bring up, let's do Briller Jeopardy. I do have a question, Joe, from Johnny Quest wants to know what causes thunderstorms to back build.
the
And
backfill.
to back build. So I guess when you have, yeah, I mean, it would probably have to do with the whole structure of the upper air. The structure of the short wave. You've got some lead thunderstorms that break out, and suddenly you see them sort of building back on the backside. Uh, I'm guessing that's what he's saying. You start with something like today in Philadelphia. You started with this one cell that just started basically expanding in all directions. But I
Right.
think I think that really is more of a function of the fact that you had such the dynamics today were really so strong, and you have virtually no flow that you basically just watch this cluster just grow and grow and grow.
Right.
So it's just a function of the dynamics that we had. It's
Is
it's
that kind of like excuse me, my throat for the last few days. The when we talk about very strong hurricanes, we often talk about the outflow.
right.
Maybe that has something to do with the on a much smaller scale with very robust, very tight thunderstorm activity. The outflow, or as Johnny Quest mentioned, like the spillage, the overflow.
hmm
That,
And then
that be something
sometimes
like the use of that, or
in an instance like this where you start to see training,
right,
which is not something that you see very often. But when you
right.
do, it can be, in some instances, it's been cataclysmic. Uh, I mean, ask the folks down. What was it Ellicott City in Maryland?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, they had 200-year floods, 3 years
right.
apart or something.
Exactly,
But a lot of
exactly.
that has to do, by the way, with the infrastructure, because when they rebuilt it from the first flood, they didn't build the way they constructed the roads and everything else was not conducive for good drainage at all. So sometimes a lot of that stuff has to do with infrastructure and how stuff is built and how areas are developed. Because I remember reading a story about that there was the infrastructure in that area was not put together thoughtfully. Let's put it that way.
I'm just looking, Joe. I'm sorry, but I get so frustrated. I I did get a question for you for Briller Jeopardy. I didn't touch it because I figured if I touched it, it was going to disappear somehow. But it didn't matter because it magically has disappeared. Oh, wait a
Disappear.
minute. Wait a minute. I think I found it. I think I found. I had to scroll all the way down to look for it.
Well,
But
I
anyway,
found yours, so I got yours. You
okay.
ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, the 100 folds in a chef's hat represent what?
Are there? I never noticed. Was I? But wait a minute. The 100. Yeah, I know that some of them have that folded look. I never noticed the fold on, for example, Chef Boyardee's chef hat.
Right.
I I would guess it's uh oh, would it have something to do with the ingredients or
Well,
something?
let's see. What did Lucy Ricardo say to Marion Strong when Marion Strong wouldn't stop laughing?
When are you going to lay that egg? I've been listening to you cackle
Right.
for
Stop
20 years.
cackling. I've waited 10 years for you to lay that egg.
An egg, right?
So it's 100 ways to make an egg,
100
to
ways to
cook an
make an
egg.
egg. Oh,
Okay. The
never
uni-
knew that.
the unicorn is the national animal of what country?
Well, it's a mythological beast. I would say. Why don't I take a
Well, it's
guess?
not a
It's Greek.
mythological country. It's a real country.
Well, I understand that, but it's a mythological beast. But a lot of mythology comes from Greek literature, so I'll say Greece.
Scotland.
What?
Scotland.
Now wait a minute. Now where does a unicorn come from Scotland?
I
I don't
don't
understand.
know.
I don't understand
I
that.
don't write. I didn't write Scottish folklore. Maybe that's where it came from.
Then
Maybe
that's
someone
that.
who's maybe someone in the audience who's familiar with Scottish lore could tell us about why the unicorn.
They should have
Um,
had. Why did they get Freddie Mercury?
although, wait a minute. Although there is the movie, it's just coming to me. The movie Brigadoon with Van Johnson and
Yeah,
Gene Kelly.
right.
I think there are, which is basically about this utopia in somewhere in the Highlands of Scotland. That I think there's a unicorn in that story, if I remember correctly. So maybe that's where it comes from.
Could be. All right.
Okay, and 3M. Okay,
Not 3M.
3M and question 3M and M. Well, 3M is Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining.
Right.
3M and M stand for
3M and
question 3. I'm sorry, M&Ms. You had this problem on Sunday, right? So now I'm
right.
having it.
M
Question
and
3. No,
three
because
M
I
and
saw
M.
no. Wait a minute. To be fair, because there is 3M that's
I thought that's what you were talking about. 3M.
3M is the Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining Company. It's called 3M. So I
That's why I
saw.
said
So
Scotch.
question
Like Scotch tape.
3M. So all right. So it's question 3. All right. Period. M&M. What does that
Yes.
stand for in the candy M&Ms? What does that stand for?
Ah, M&M. Well, they're made by Mars, right? Mars
Right.
candy. Mars and so I would think that one of the M's stands for Mars.
One is Mars, and Murray is the other one, Murrie. And I also remember seeing a story about the beginnings of that company. And I'm thinking that Murray is the name of the man who started the Mars company, who started the company that he eventually sold it to someone named Mars, and who brought the company up to the size that it is today. Which is a private, and Mars Corporation is a private company. So it's kind of interesting. So what's
We
mine?
Actually, there was one I didn't give you yesterday, and I was going to give it to you today, but Scott already included that in today's question. So, question one: can you name the top 5 Fortune 500 companies?
The top five Fortune 500 companies. Okay,
Correct.
as of today's market close. All right.
Right.
So, as in terms of, I don't know how the Fortune 500, if it's rated by market capitalization, but if it is, it's going to be Amazon,
Right.
Apple,
Right.
um, Google,
Not one
Amazon.
of them.
Well, unless it's under there as Alphabet.
He actually gave me six.
All right,
He
so
put the top
let me
one.
give you the ones I think they should be. Okay,
Right.
in terms of market capitalization, so it would be Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, and let's see, uh, FA. No, Facebook's not up there yet. Um, Microsoft.
Not one of them.
So you give me the companies, and I'll tell you if that's still the case. Go ahead.
Okay. So these are the top five, actually the top six, I guess, according to Scott. Walmart,
Right.
Amazon,
All right.
Exxon,
Exxon's not in it anymore. That's probably as of that
Exxon Mobil, actually.
Exxon
Oh,
Mobil.
I see them.
It's probably it's not anymore. But go on.
Okay. All right. That's why I said six. I didn't see Exxon. He didn't put a hyphen after Exxon for Exxon Mobil. So Walmart, Amazon, Exxon Mobil, Apple, and CVS.
No, in terms of market capitalization, see that's the thing. It's also a lot has changed since the end of last year. So, oh, hang on, I just accidentally. There you go. Um, I lost us. Just a second. Hang on. I'll get everybody. I'll get it back.
What'd you lose?
Our picture. There we
Oh,
go. There we go. You know, I inadvertently clicked. So yeah, a
okay.
lot has changed since the beginning of the year. There's a lot of companies that are no longer that were in the top five or the top 10 that have dropped because other ones have come up. But so it would depend on as of what date. As of December 31st, I would say, well, CVS is CVS Aetna, so I don't think it has the same. It has that capitalization, but that's again today. As of today, it's probably a different top five. So anyway,
Okay.
it's a good, interesting question. What's the next one, or is that the only one?
No, no, that's number two. This one is the one that was left over from yesterday that we never got to. What is Chicago's record for most consecutive 90-degree days?
I am going to say I'm going to say it's a number bigger than New York's. So I will say 15.
12. Oh, no, excuse me, 11.
11.
Why
All
did I say
right.
12?
My logic was off. I thought it might have been a little higher. Okay. So is that it?
That is it,
All right. So look, folks,
boys and
that
girls.
yeah, we're gonna call it a night so that I can save my data because once I lose my hotspot, it's going to be almost impossible for me to do live streams. So keep your fingers crossed that the internet repairman shows up to fix. For those of you who don't know, on Friday I sat outside my front porch watching a thunderstorm. And also watched a lightning bolt come down 40 feet away from me and strike the internet box where the wiring comes from the telephone pole to the house. So we lost it just singed everything. So I have to wait for them to come along. And in the meantime, I'm running this off my telephone and the data is limited. So what are you going to do? All right, everybody, have a great night. Stay safe. We'll keep an eye on the tropics, and we will be back tomorrow at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Actually, there's a possibility we may go on a little later tomorrow. Okay, so just a heads up to everybody. There's a chance that we may.